Yankee Girl in the hand. The Handsy haunting. Rain hammered against the windows of Waverly Manor as another black limousine climbed the hill. The mansion stood alone above the city, wrapped in fog and lit by flashes of lightning that turned its towers white against the night sky. The newspapers called it haunted. The rich called it fashionable. And every Friday at midnight, the city's wealthiest guests gathered there for séances, hosted by the mysterious Madame Veloura. People arrived wearing diamonds. They left pale, shaking, and missing jewelry. Some claimed invisible hands touched them in the darkness. Others swore ghostly messages appeared on mirrors. One senator reportedly fainted after something slapped him during a séance. The newspapers loved it. Yankee Girl didn't. She stepped from her car at the base of the mansion stairs, purple cape whipping in the storm winds as thunder rolled overhead. "Haunted mansion," she muttered. "Sure." The heavy front doors creaked open before she even touched them. A tall butler stood waiting inside. The man looked nervous, very nervous. "Madame Veloura has been expecting you," he said quietly. Yankee Girl smirked. "That's funny. I wasn't planning on coming." The butler didn't smile. That was the first sign something was wrong. Inside, Waverly Manor looked less like a home and more like a stage set built to frighten rich people on purpose. Heavy curtains, dark mirrors, candlelight, strange statues staring from corners. The guests gathered in the séance chamber, spoke in nervous whispers, while servants carried trays of drinks through the room. Everyone looked uncomfortable, except Madame Veloura. She sat at the center of the long séance table, dressed in flowing black silk, rings glittering on every finger. Beautiful, calm, dangerous. Her smile widened when she saw Yankee Girl. "How wonderful," Veloura purred. "A true believer joins us." Yankee Girl folded her arms. "Lady, I don't even believe your wallpaper." Several guests laughed nervously. Veloura's smile tightened. "Then perhaps tonight," she said softly, "the spirits will convince you." Lightning flashed outside the mansion windows. The candles dimmed, and somewhere deep inside the walls, something moved. Midnight struck. Every candle in the room flickered at once. The séance began. Guests joined hands around the long table, while Madame Veloura closed her eyes dramatically and lowered her voice to a whisper. "The spirits gather." The room grew colder. A woman gasped as the curtains suddenly moved by themselves. A glass shattered somewhere in the darkness. Then came the knocking. 3 slow taps from inside the walls. One guest nearly jumped out of his chair. Another reached immediately for the exit. Yankee Girl stayed perfectly still, watching, listening. The noises felt too perfect, too rehearsed. Veloura raised her hand slowly above the glowing crystal ball. "The dead walk beside us tonight." The candles went out. The room plunged into darkness. Guests screamed. A chair tipped over. Something brushed against Yankee Girl's shoulder. Then lightning flashed across the windows, and a pale floating hand appeared above the table. Several people shrieked. One rich old banker fainted instantly. The floating hand drifted silently through the darkness, while guests panicked around the room. But Yankee Girl noticed something strange. The hand wasn't frightening people. It was looking around the room, almost annoyed. The floating hand suddenly pointed toward the far corner. Then, with shocking speed, slap! The crooked butler stumbled sideways, clutching his face. The entire room froze. Yankee Girl blinked. "Well," she said slowly, "that's new." The floating hand pointed angrily at the butler again, then at the curtains, then at Veloura. Yankee Girl's eyes narrowed. "You're not part of the act, are you?" The hand gave a sarcastic little bow. Before anyone could react, the lights exploded back on. Masked men burst from behind the curtains. The séance had been a setup. Guests screamed as crooks rushed through the room, grabbing jewelry, wallets, and handbags. Veloura stood from the table, smiling coldly. "Thank you all for your donations." Yankee Girl cracked her knuckles. "Oh, now I'm having fun." The séance chamber erupted into chaos. Yankee Girl flipped the heavy table sideways as masked thieves charged toward her. One crook flew backward into the wall hard enough to crack the paneling. Another tried grabbing her cape. That was a mistake. Yankee Girl hurled him directly into the crystal ball stand, sending sparks and shattered glass across the room. Meanwhile, the hand was causing problems everywhere. It yanked pistols from holsters, untied shoelaces, pulled masks off crooks at the worst possible moments. At one point, it slapped the same thug 3 times in a row, just because it apparently found it funny. The mansion's elegant atmosphere collapsed instantly into pure madness. Then Veloura disappeared. Yankee Girl spotted her slipping through a hidden doorway behind one of the fireplace statues. "Secret passage," she muttered. "Classic." The hand floated beside her and gave a thumbs up. Together they entered the hidden corridor behind the walls of Waverly Manor. The secret passage stretched through the mansion like a spiderweb. Hidden machinery lined the walls. Wire systems, fake ghost devices, smoke machines, magnetic table controls. Everything had been engineered to create the perfect haunting. The hand pointed smugly at the equipment like it had personally solved the mystery. "Don't get cocky," Yankee Girl warned. "You're literally a floating hand." The hand paused, then gave her an offended middle finger. Yankee Girl burst out laughing despite herself. Ahead of them, Veloura hurried through the hidden tunnels, clutching a velvet bag stuffed with stolen jewelry. "You fools!" she shouted back. "Do you know how much money people pay to be frightened?" The hand zipped forward through the corridor like a furious ghost. Veloura screamed as it grabbed her ankle. She tripped violently, and the stolen jewel bag exploded open across the floor. Diamonds scattered everywhere. The hand proudly crossed 2 fingers like a victory pose. Yankee Girl shook her head. "You are way too happy about this." Police cars surrounded Waverly Manor by dawn. The fake haunting was finished. Guests recovered their stolen valuables, while officers dragged crooks from the mansion one by one. Reporters crowded outside the gates, desperate for answers. Nobody could quite explain the floating hand. Probably for the best. Inside the ruined séance chamber, Madame Veloura sat handcuffed beside the wreckage of her ghost empire. Hidden wires hung from the ceiling. Mirrors were shattered. Smoke machines still hissed weakly in the corners. The hand floated lazily above the room, inspecting the damage like an artist admiring its own work. Yankee Girl stood beside a broken window, watching sunrise break across the city skyline. "You know," she admitted, "for a disembodied hand, you're not terrible company." The hand floated proudly for a moment, then gently tapped her shoulder. Yankee Girl smirked. "Don't push your luck." The hand slowly formed a heart shape with 2 fingers. Yankee Girl rolled her eyes. "Unbelievable." Outside, reporters shouted questions, while police loaded crooks into waiting cars. But inside the mansion, the strange partnership quietly came to an end. The hand drifted toward the shattered mirror at the back of the seance chamber. Then slowly, it wrote 2 words across the dusty glass. "Nice try." Yankee Girl laughed softly. The hand gave one final wave and vanished into the shadows of the old mansion. The haunting was over, but somewhere in the city, the hand was still out there, and trouble usually followed close behind.